Imagine planting something that looks harmless. If you think this list is only marijuana, it is not. It starts with a vegetable, a berry, a rose, and maybe a floating plant from an aquarium. It is not mushrooms. It is not some secret crop hidden in the woods, but under the wrong rule, in the wrong state, or across the wrong state line, that plant can turn into a legal problem fast. Now, to be clear, illegal plant does not always mean the same thing. Sometimes it means you cannot import it. Sometimes it means you cannot move it across state lines. Sometimes the state says you cannot sell it, propagate it, transport it, or intentionally spread it. And sometimes, yes, the plant is tied directly to federal controlled substance law. That difference matters. It is the difference between a permit problem, a destroyed shipment, a state invasive plant order, and a federal controlled substance issue. So today we are ranking 1-5 plants Americans do not realize can be illegal. Not myths, not garden gossip. The exact plants, the exact restrictions, and the reason officials cared. One quick thing before the list. This is our first video in this format. Depending on your reaction and how many likes this gets, we will know whether it is worth filming part 2, and the episodes that follow. YouTube does not always show you the same channel twice. You might never see this channel again, so if you want more stories like this, where ordinary plants turn into strange legal problems, subscribe now. Stunning with something that sounds like dinner. Moan 15 Water spinach. Water spinach sounds like the least suspicious plant in the world. It is leafy. It is edible. In many cuisines, it is just food. If you saw it in a market, your first thought would not be federal regulation. But this plant has another name, swamp morning glory, and that tells you why officials pay attention. Water spinach can grow aggressively in wet places. It can spread through waterways, and under federal rules, the species Ipomoea aquatica is listed as a federal noxious weed. That does not mean every person who has heard of water spinach is suddenly in trouble. The legal issue is more specific. APs requires permits for importing federal noxious weeds or moving them interstate. Under the federal rule, no person may move a listed noxious weed into or through the United States or across state lines unless the movement is approved and follows the permit conditions. Water spinach can be food and still be federally regulated. The problem is import or interstate movement without the right AP his permit. That is the strange thing about plant law. The headline says, banned plant. The rule says, what species, what movement, what permit. And if a leafy vegetable can become a federal permit issue, the next plant shows how an ordinary-looking tree can become a state problem. Moga 14. Tree of Heaven. Tree of Heaven, Praint of Heaven, has one of the most innocent names on this list. It sounds like something a city might plant on purpose. And in many places, you can find it doing exactly what aggressive urban trees do, popping up near sidewalks, alleys, fence lines, and vacant lots. But in Ohio, Tree of Heaven is not treated like a normal nursery tree. The state lists Ailanthus altissima as an invasive plant, and the rule is very direct. A person may not sell it, offer it for sale, propagate it, distribute it, import it, or intentionally cause it to spread. That is a lot of verbs for one tree, and the verbs matter. This is not a claim that every tree of heaven standing somewhere in America creates a criminal case. The rule we are talking about is a state invasive plant restriction. In Ohio, the legal target is sale, propagation, distribution, import, and intentional spread. Why care about a tree? Because invasive plants do not just sit there looking ugly, they outcompete other plants. They move into disturbed land. They create management costs. That is why state invasive plant lists exist in the first place. So this is the first real twist of the list. The scary part is not the tree's name. It is the rule attached to it, and if an urban tree can be restricted, a rose can be too. Number 13. Multiflora rose. A rose is supposed to be safe territory. It is the plant people buy for gardens, fences, old farmhouses, and Valentine's Day. But not every rose behaves like a polite garden plant. Multiflora rose can form dense thorny thickets. It can crowd out native vegetation. It can make pastures harder to use, and once it is established, it is not a romantic flower anymore. It is a management problem. That is why some states regulate it. Pennsylvania says Multiflora rose was added to its noxious weed law, and that it is a violation to sell, transport, plant, or otherwise propagate it within the Commonwealth. Minnesota also treats it as a regulated noxious weed. Propagation and sale are prohibited there, and transportation is only allowed under state rules. A game. The law is narrower than the headline. This is not every rose. This is not your florist bouquet. This is Rosa multiflora, in states where the legal verbs include selling, transporting, planting, or propagating it. That precision is what keeps the story honest. Because the moment you say roses are illegal, you are lying. But the moment you say, this invasive rose can be illegal to sell, move, plant, or propagate in certain states, you are in the real story, and the next plant sounds even more harmless because it has the word apple in it. No 12. Tropical soda apple. Tropical soda apple sounds like something from a farmer's market. Kurter fruitry, a novelty croppa, something you would see in a video titled, I tasted the weirdest fruit in Florida. It is not that tropical soda. Apple is a nightshade. The scientific name is Solanum viarum, and under federal rules, it is listed as a noxious weed. The reason is not the name. It is what the plant does. Tropical soda apple can invade pastures and disturb land. It can spread through seeds. It becomes a problem for agriculture and ecosystems, which is exactly the type of plant Apis is built to watch. The legal mechanism is the same federal bucket we saw with water spinach. As a federal noxious weed, importing it or moving it interstate requires APS permission. Movement outside those rules can trigger seizure, quarantine, treatment, destruction, or disposal under the noxious weed framework. This is not a normal apple. Tropical soda apple is a federally listed noxious weed, so moving it across state lines or importing it requires APS permission. That is why common names can be dangerous. Apple sounds edible. Soda apple sounds almost cute. But the law does not regulate cuteness. It regulates a species, and the next one does the same thing with the word berry, Opium 11. Turkeyberry sounds like something you could put in a sauce. And in some parts of the world, related food traditions make that name feel even less suspicious. But in the United States federal noxious weed list, the exact plant Solanum torvum appears as Turkeyberry. That exact species is the point. This is not a general berries. It is not about strawberries. It is not about blueberries. It is not even about every plant someone casually calls a berry. It is about Solanum torvum and the federal noxious weed rules attached to it. Under federal noxious weed rules, moving a listed weed into or through the United States or moving it interstate requires an approved permit and compliance with permit conditions. Without that, the movement is prohibited. The legal risk is not that the word berry appears on a label. The legal risk is the exact species and the exact movement. That may sound technical, but technical is where plant law lives. A common name can hide a serious rule. A scientific name can decide whether a shipment is ordinary or regulated. And now the list moves into the most likely part, fruits Americans actually recognize. Because yes, even blackberry and raspberry can show up in this story, but not the way a fake viral post would tell it. No 10. Wild blackberry cannaberries feel American. They grow along trails, they grow near fences, they show up in pies, jams, and summer memories. So if someone says blackberry is illegal, the right reaction is skepticism, because that statement is too broad. The real legal story is narrower. Federal rules list the Rubus fruticosus complex as a noxious weed. That is a specific wild blackberry group, not a ban on every blackberry plant in every backyard. Under the federal noxious weed rule, the issue is import and interstate movement. If a plant is on that list, moving it into or through the United States or across state lines requires APHIS approval and permit compliance. That is very different from saying a bowl of blackberries is contraband. It is not. The law is focused on the plant material and the movement of the listed weed. That is how this list earns trust. Because the viral version would say, blackberries are banned. The real version says, not every blackberry. A specific wild rubus complex is federally regulated for import and interstate movement. That is less flashy. It is also the truth, and the same trap appears with raspberry over 9. Wild raspberry, there's berry has the same problem as blackberry. The word sounds too normal to be on a government list, but the federal noxious weed list does not care how normal a common name sounds. It names species. One of them is Rubus mollicanus, identified as wild raspberry or Molucca raspberry again. That does not mean ordinary garden raspberries are illegal. It means this exact wild raspberry appears in the federal noxious weed context. The legal mechanism is import and interstate movement without the required APIS permit. That is the recurring pattern in the first half of the list, not possession panic, not your breakfast is illegal. Species, movement, permit, and it matters. Because plants do not respect property lines. Seeds move, stems move, water moves, soil moves. People move plants to online orders, nurseries, swaps, and shipments. That is why a berry can become a regulation story. but berries are still land plants. The next one shows why water plants make regulators even more nervous, because a small aquarium-looking plant can become a lake problem. Momming 8. Hydrilla. Hydrilla does not look like a legal issue. It looks like something you might see in a fish tank, thin green growth. Underwater stems, nothing dramatic at first glance, but in waterways, hydrilla can become a nightmare. It can form dense underwater mats. It can interfere with boating and recreation. It can crowd out native aquatic plants. It can change habitat, water flow, and management costs. That is why Hydrilla verticillata is listed as a federal noxious weed. Eating it or moving it interstate requires an approved permit. Movement that does not comply with federal noxious weed rules can be stopped, seized, quarantined, treated, destroyed, or otherwise disposed of. Hydrilla is regulated because a tiny aquarium-looking plant can become a waterway problem. The federal rule is about importing or moving it interstate without a permit. Until now, the danger was partly hidden. A vegetable, a rose, a berry with the hydrilla. You can see the logic. One plant becomes a mat. The mat becomes a management problem. The management problem becomes a rule. And if hydrilla is the underwater, they float. Next plant is the floating version. Door 7. Giant salvinia. Giant salvinia is almost too perfect for this kind of story. It floats, it spreads, and when it gets out of control, it can cover water like a green carpet. That carpet is not just ugly. It blocks sunlight. It changes oxygen levels. It hurts fish and native plants. It can interfere with boats, canals, drainage, and recreation. Federal rules list several salvinia species under the giant salvinia name, including Salvinia molesta, a quote to federal testimony. As a listed federal noxious weed, giant salvinia cannot be imported into the United States or transported across state lines without a federal permit from APS. That is the lie. Not all floating plants are illegal. Not every pond plant is contraband. Listed giant salvinia species. Import, interstate transport, APS permit. By now, the pattern should feel familiar. But giant salvinia raises the stakes visually because you do not need a law degree to understand why officials care. When a plant can cover a water surface, the plant is not just living in the ecosystem. It is changing the ecosystem, and the next plant is the land version of that idea. The vine that became an American legend, though 6, Kudzu, is famous for a reason. It is the vine people describe as eating the South. That phrase is exaggerated, but the image is real enough. Green growth over trees, power lines, abandoned structures, roadsides, and hillsides. Kudzu is what happens when a plant becomes a landscape, and in Indiana the law treats it very directly. The state rule says a person must not sell, distribute, offer for sale or distribution, give away, barter, exchange, or plant any life, stage, or reproductive material of Kudzu. Known property owners must also take efforts to eliminate it. That is much more specific than Kudzu is bad. The law names the actions: selling, distributing, giving away, bartering, exchanging, planting, and it names the material: life stages or reproductive material. This is not a federal controlled substance story. It is an invasive plant control story. But it still matters because a plant like Kudzu does not stay politely inside the place. Someone planted it. It moves through landscapes. It creates costs for neighbors, land managers, and public agencies. Kudzu is the bridge from surprising rules to obvious ones, and the next plant makes the reason even more personal, because some plants are not just invasive. They can hurt you. Node 5. Giant hogweed. Giant hogweed looks like something from a fantasy movie. Huge stalks, huge leaves, white flower clusters that can tower over a person. If you did not know what it was, you might call it impressive. Officials call it something else: a harmful invasive plant. The reason is the sap. Giant hogweed sap can make skin extremely sensitive to sunlight. Contact, followed by sun exposure, can cause severe burns, blistering, scarring, and serious eye injury. That is not internet folklore. State and federal invasive species sources warn about it directly, and the legal rules match the danger. Giant hogweed is federally regulated as a noxious weed, which makes import or interstate transport without a permit a legal issue. State guidance says New York law prohibits possession with intent to sell, import, purchase, transport, introduce, or propagate it. Minnesota says transportation, propagation, or sale is not allowed, and failure to comply can lead to enforcement action. That is a lot packed into one plant. Federal movement, restriction, sale, and propagation bans, human health warnings. We still have to stay precise. Accidental contact does not automatically make someone a criminal. And not every tall, white-flowered plant is giant hogweed. Giant hogweed is one of the plants where the legal story and the body horror story meet. It is regulated because it spreads, and it is feared because touching it can change your skin. After this, the list changes categories. We leave invasive plants, and we enter federal controlled patents law. Number 4. Cannabis. Remember the opening. We said this list does not start with marijuana. It still gets there. Cannabis is the one plant everyone expects in a video like this, but it is also the one people misunderstand the fastest, because in the United States, cannabis law is not one law. It is a conflict. Some states allow medical use, some allow adult recreation use, some allow home growing under state rules, some do not, but federal law still treats non-hemp marijuana as a controlled substance. Under federal definitions, marijuana includes all parts of cannabis sativa, whether growing or not, with hemp and other listed exceptions carved out. Federal law also defines production to include planting, cultivation, growing, or harvesting of a controlled substance, and persons who manufacture controlled substances lawfully need federal registration. Cannabis is not illegal everywhere. That would be false. Some states allow home grow, but federal law still treats non-hemp marijuana as a controlled substance and defines production to include planting and growing. That is why cannabis sits at number 4, not number 1. It is legally serious, but it is not surprising anymore. Most Americans know cannabis law is complicated. The next plant is smaller, quieter, and much easier to mistake for a collector's item. Mode 3. Peyote. Peyote does not look like a dramatic plant. It is small, rounded, slow-growing, the kind of cactus someone might imagine in a collection. But federal law is not looking at the shape. It is looking at the substance. Peyote, Lophophora, Williamsi, is listed as a Schedule I controlled substance. Federal rules define peyote broadly. All parts of the plant, whether growing or not, including seeds, extracts, and preparations. That is why casual language can get this one wrong. It is not just a cactus. It is a specifically scheduled plant. There are narrow legal protections connected to bona fide religious ceremonies of the Native American Church and traditional Indian religious use. Those protections matter and they deserve respect. They are not a loophole. They are not a joke. They also do not turn peyote into an ordinary cactus. For most casual growers outside those narrow protected contexts, unauthorized possession, manufacture, or distribution can create federal controlled substance exposure. Peyote is federally controlled down to the plant seeds, extracts, and preparations, with narrow religious protections that do not apply to most casual growers. That is why it ranks above cannabis. Cannabis is famous. Peyote is easy to underestimate, and the next plant is even trickier because part of it is associated with something completely normal. Food Nugger 2. Opium poppy. Opium poppy is one of the most legally confusing plants in America because poppy seeds are normal. You can see them on bagels, you can find them in baked goods, you can buy food products that contain them, and then there is Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy federal rules. List opium poppy and poppy straw as Schedule T controlled substances. They also list concentrate of poppy straw. Federal law also defines production to include planting, cultivating, growing, or harvesting a controlled substance. That is the uncomfortable part. The same plant family that shows up in a bakery conversation also shows up in controlled substance law. This is not every poppy flower, and ordinary food poppy seeds are not the same story. The opium poppy is legally tricky. Food poppy seeds exist, but opium, poppy, and poppy straw are federally scheduled controlled substances, and production includes planting and growing under federal definitions. That is why this plant earns the number 2 spot. It looks like a garden flower. It connects to ordinary food, and yet the controlled substance framework is sitting right behind it. There is only one plant left. And unlike poppy, Americans do not usually confuse this one with a normal backyard crop. Nonu. 1. Coca plant, coca leaves. Coca is the hardest endpoint on this list, not because it is the most common. It is not because Americans are accidentally growing it in every neighborhood. They are not. It ranks number 1 because the federal controlled substance connection is direct and instantly understood. Federal rules list coca leaves and any salt, compound, derivative, or preparation of coca leaves as Schedule T. That includes cocaine and egonine. The law also carves out decocainized coca leaves or extractions that do not contain cocaine or egonine. That exception is important, but it does not turn ordinary coca plant material into a casual houseplant. Under federal law, unauthorized possession, production, manufacture, distribution, import, or export involving coca leaves or controlled derivatives can create serious exposure. Coca is not a normal backyard plant in the United States. Coca leaves themselves are federally sketched, and that is the end point of the whole video. We started with water spinach, then a tree, then a rose, then berries, water plants, a vine, and a giant plant that can burn your skin, and we ended with plants tied directly to controlled substance law. The lesson is not that every strange plant is illegal. The lesson is that plant law is specific. Species matters, lines matter, permits matter. And sometimes the difference between a harmless garden experiment and a serious legal problem is one word in an official list. If this list was useful, subscribe. We are not doing garden myths here. We check the actual rules, the actual agencies, and the exact wording. And if you want the next episode before the algorithm hides it again, hit subscribe now. And if you are watching from the US, here is the question. Have you ever seen officials remove an invasive plant near you?